I've learnt the sounds of this city like a second language, the hiss of wet tires, the low iron groan of the bridge, the broken glass laughter that drifts up from the river when the wind is wrong. None of it surprises me anymore. Not the sirens, not the prayers, not the way the night forgets to be gentle. But that sound wasn't on my list. It came thin and high, like a wire pulled too tight. A human sound, but smaller, new. A cry that didn't know its own name yet. A baby. The thought hit me slow, like a word you haven't said in years and unsure belongs to you. I was sitting by my small fire, coaxing the flame to climb into the damp wood and make itself at home, when the sound tugged at the edges of the dark. Once, twice, then again, after a breath that felt too long. I stood up, joints arguing with the cold. The underbelly of the bridge was a cathedral of shadows, black girders, crossing like ribs overhead. Rain ticking in the seams, the river whispering bad advice. I turned toward the slope that runs down to the service road, where people dump the parts of their lives they no longer want. Busted chairs, cracked televisions, boxes of clothes that still remember other winters. There it was, not a cradle, not a basket. An old grocery cart with a blanket tucked deep in its belly, as if someone had built a nest out of yesterday. The cart's wheels were turned sideways, jammed against broken asphalt, like it had been pushed here by a person who couldn't afford to let it roll any farther. Another cry, the kind that starts with the mouth and ends with the whole body. I knelt and peeled the blanket back. He was the size of the truth you deny at first, swaddled sloppy, his cheeks red from effort, his hands the color of dawn under streetlight. No hat, no socks. Just the thin cotton of a onesie with little blue bears that had already learned how to look tired. His hair was the soft kind you only see on new humans, more promise than fact. I don't know how long I stared. A minute. A lifetime. My breath fogged into him and his into me, and the river kept talking to itself like none of this mattered. "Hey there," I said, and my voice sounded wrong in my own ears, too big for his small world. He hiccuped, then cried again, a saw-tooth rhythm that grabbed something old inside me and shook it awake. I lifted him out, surprised by the weight, surprised by how quickly a person can begin to feel essential. He was warm, but not warm enough. I tucked him into my coat, pressed him against the part of my chest that still remembers being useful, and the sound he made changed shape. Not a cry, not yet a calm, just the sound of a fragile machine deciding whether to run. There was a note. I found it trapped between the blanket folds, creased, damp at the corners, the paper thin from being held too tight. The handwriting was hurried, the kind that forgets the space between letters. "Please take care of him. I can't." No name, no explanation, just the kind of sentence that doesn't leave room for debate. I looked up toward the street. Headlights slid past in careful lines. A buzz exhaled. Somewhere, a door opened and closed. No footsteps, no one waiting in the dark to see if I'd obey the note. Only the cart, the blanket, the lying down world of the bridge, and a decision I had not prepared to make. "Okay," I told the blanket, as if it were the kind of audience that needed convincing. "Okay." I carried him to the fire and made the flames kneel closer. The heat was thin, but it reached. I held my hands out, palms open, then pulled them back and cupped them around his head instead, building a small shelter, the way I wish I'd have done for other things when it wasn't too late. His breathing found a rhythm. So did mine. Everything else I own fits in a backpack that's seen more sidewalks than futures. I pulled it close and took stock like a surgeon with a pocket knife. One wool scarf, one half-clean shirt, a thermos with coffee, that had lost the argument it was having with itself. A metal cup, a small jar of petroleum jelly. A nurse once handed me at a clinic and said, "This is the difference between a crack and a wound." Matches. 3 squares of chocolate I'd been saving for when I needed to believe in sweetness. And at the very bottom, tucked under a book with more blank pages than written ones, a soft knit cap someone had given me last winter after church, baby-sized, though at the time I didn't know why I kept it. I do now. I slid the hat over his head with the kind of care that makes time slow down. He flinched, then settled. I wrapped the scarf around him twice and tucked the edges inside my coat, then moved closer to the fire until I could feel heat against both of us. Rain tapped a patient beat on the steel above, and somewhere a train called out like a far-off animal learning its own name. "Where is she?" I asked the night. The night didn't answer. It never does. It just holds what you put in it and waits. I thought about hospitals, about phones, about the kind of help that arrives with forms to fill out and eyebrows raised. I thought about the news, the way stories like this grow teeth and start telling themselves, leaving out the parts that make them less useful to people who want to shake their heads and sleep well afterward. And I thought about my hands, about whether they were the right ones to be holding a life. "He's not mine," I told the fire, which is the same thing I once told myself about other responsibilities until they stopped waiting for my permission. The baby's fingers, 5 grains of rice, flexed against my shirt and stayed there, as if to argue. I stayed like that until the night loosened its grip and the sky began the slow grey work of remembering its color. A pigeon dropped down from the bridge beams and looked at us like we were an unlicensed show. The baby had fallen asleep. His mouth was a soft O, the same shape the city makes when it remembers to be amazed by something small. I read the note again. "Please take care of him." "I can't. Why me?" I asked, softer now. "Why here? It's a dangerous thing to believe you were chosen for anything. I learned that the hard way, once in a room with a window that wouldn't open, once at an altar where the only honest vows were the ones I kept to myself. But the underbridge is a magnet for hard truths and easy sins. It pulls what it needs." Maybe she passed and saw the fire, saw the old man who talks to it, and decided the world had done stranger things than ask me for mercy. The morning wove itself out of damp and exhaust. People started appearing at the edges of the underpass, workers cutting across to shave a block off their walk. A team with a skateboard that sounded like escape. A woman in white shoes who made the river look like a floor someone had forgotten to mop. They glanced over without stopping. Their eyes slid across us like a finger across a menu, when you already know you can't afford anything. Benny came last, dragging his cart full of cans and apologies. He saw me hunched around the small bundle and whistled low. "What's that, Walt? A miracle or a mistake?" "Both," I said. He leaned in, and his face went the kind of soft I don't see on him often. "Well, I'll be." "Look at you," he said to the baby, then to me. "Look at you." "There was a note," I said. "She said she couldn't." Benny shrugged, but the shrug had history in it. "Lots of things a person can't," he said. "Lots of things they can't, till they do." "Did you see anyone?" I asked. "Last night?" He shook his head. "Rain had me sleeping under the L. Sounded like God playing dice with nails up there. Didn't hear much of anything but the rattling." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a peppermint, turned it over in his palm like he was measuring the difference between treat and offering, and set it on the edge of the blanket in the cart, in case he gets old enough by lunch. I smiled despite myself. "Thanks, Ben." He nodded, and his cart squealed down the path, making that stubborn music of survival. I watched him go, wishing, not for the first time, that goodwill came with instructions. I knew what the right thing was supposed to be. Call it in, make it official. Put the smallest person in the hands of the biggest rooms. But I also knew what happened when stories like this met the machinery of concern. Papers got stamped, photos got taken, clocks got punched. And sometimes the thing at the center, the baby, the woman, the little knot of impossible love, got lost under all that helpfulness. I don't know what I'm doing, I admitted to the place in my coat where his breath warmed the cloth. His eyes opened, dark, liquid, undecided, and fixed on me with the slow fascination of a planet choosing a sun. For a second, I saw myself the way he saw me, a face drawn in smoke and ledgers on the skin. A man whose kindness comes with an expiration date he doesn't control. A stranger whose name will never make the news. Okay, I said again, because sometimes that's the only true word. Okay. I tore the last of the chocolate into thumbnail pieces and let one melt in my mouth, hoping the sugar would think for me. It didn't. Nothing got smarter. The morning got colder. The baby found his voice again and pushed sound into the world with the kind of certainty I envy. Food, I said to no one, and stood. There's a soup kitchen 3 blocks over that loves the word policy almost as much as it loves Jesus. I have learned the cadence of the volunteers there, their practiced warmth, their tired arithmetic. I wrapped the baby tight, tucked the blanket inside the coat like a question you're not ready to ask, and climbed the slope to the service road. The city met us with wet breath and an attitude. On the way we passed the bench where I've seen good people forget how to keep going. Under it, a crushed cigarette packet glowed with the lie of its colors. A poster for a missing dog leaned tired in the rain. A bus pulled up too fast, and the driver saw us and softened his eyes a fraction, then looked away as if kindness had too high a fare. At the church hall, the door stuck the way pride does. I shouldered it. The heat inside felt like a favor. Fluorescent lights made everyone look a little more honest than they meant to. The room smelled like coffee that had committed to its bitterness and bread that had promised to be more than it could. A woman in a red sweater glanced up from a clipboard and started her sentence before she'd decided which one it should be. We're not a... Her face changed gears. Is that? Yes, I said. He's new. Another volunteer. A man with hair that had retired but kept showing up to work. Stepped closer with both hands out like he was approaching a skittish animal. Where's the mother? If I knew, I said, I'd be asking her the same thing you're about to ask me. They traded a look. Not a bad one. Just the kind people make when they find themselves inside a story that needs a better ending than they know how to write. We have formulate, the woman said. Not much, but some. And diapers. And there's a room tiny but warmer than outside. You can sit there a while. The word room did something to me. It pulled at threads I keep tied tight. I followed her down a short hallway into a space no bigger than a confession. There was a rocking chair, a faded mural of clouds that had seen more storms than the painter intended, and a sink that sang when you turned it on. She brought a small bottle, warm enough to matter. I took off my gloves and felt my fingers remember how to move small, careful, precise. He latched on after a few false starts and pulled at the world like it might forgive him if he asked right. What's his name? She asked softly. I looked at the note again. Please take care of him. I can't. It doesn't say. She watched me the way a person watches a bridge they've been told is safe, but still prefers to cross fast. And you? Walter, I said. Walter Gray. Walter, I'm Anna. She almost offered me her hand, then thought better of it and nodded instead. We'll call Child Services, she said, not unkindly, not immediately either. But you can stay here while he eats. Get warm. Breathe. I nodded, because the list of things I could control had just been reduced to one. The angle at which I held him so the milk found its way without making him work too hard. He fell asleep halfway through. His mouth stayed open, the way sleep teaches us to trust. I set the bottle down and let the chair move a little. Not enough to wake him, enough to convince him the world was a gentle thing between breaths. "Where did you find him?" Anna asked, voice lowered by instinct. "Under the bridge," I said. "In a cart." She didn't say, of course. She didn't say again. She just looked at him like he was an answer delivered to the wrong address. "We'll help," she said, "however we can." I wanted to tell her how many times I've heard those words, how many definitions, how often the fine print writes itself while you're not looking. Instead I said, "Thank you," because gratitude is a kind of shelter too. I reached into my coat for the note and realized there was something else folded behind it, another slip of paper I hadn't felt before, thin as a promise. I eased it free, careful not to jostle him. A bus transfer, dated last night. One punch mark. A stop circled in blue pen. And at the bottom, just one word written in the same rushed hand. "Sorry." I looked at the circle and felt the city rearrange its furniture around us. Sometimes a clue is a lifeline. Sometimes it's just a longer way to drown. I tucked the slip back into my pocket and watched the baby sleep like he'd been practicing his whole life. Outside, the rain took a breath. Somewhere a siren argued with itself. The world didn't know it had been given a chance to be better in a room the size of Mercy. I leaned in close enough that he could borrow my warmth a little longer. "It's okay," I told him, and for once, I almost believed it. The rain finally gave up, leaving the city glazed and trembling. I stepped out of the church with the baby still against my chest, the blanket pulled tight enough to make us one creature. The street steamed, manholes exhaling, street lamps hanging halos over puddles. The world smelled like wet iron and repentance. Anna had pressed a small paper bag into my hand. Formula powder, 2 bottles, a packet of wipes. The kind of mercy that fits in a sack. She wrote her name and number on the back of a receipt and said, "Call if you find her." If. That word echoed longer than the church bells. I walked east toward the bus line. The transfer I'd found in my pocket was crumpled, the ink bleeding where the circle had been drawn. The stop was near the river market, a place that looks kind during the day and confesses its sins at night. As I walked, the baby shifted, making a small noise that was almost a question. I answered with the sound a man makes when he wants to sound sure. "We'll see." The sky above the river was the color of a bruise healing. The bus stop was easy to find, a metal shelter with one broken pane and a poster half peeled away. I sat down on the cold bench, and the city moved around us. Across the street, a diner blinked its open sign, the O flickering like a dying promise. The window fogged from the heat inside, and shapes moved, silhouettes of people who still had destinations. I took out the note again. The handwriting. Female, I thought. Quick, uncertain. Maybe written in the dark. Maybe in the middle of deciding whether to keep living. "Please take care of him. I can't." The words didn't just say surrender, they said confession. The baby stirred, and I held him a little closer. A woman passed by, pushing a stroller, her umbrella bright yellow against the grey. She smiled at me, the reflex kind, until her eyes found a small face inside my coat. Then the smile broke in half, and she looked away fast, like she'd stepped on a memory. That's what the world does with pain, pretends it's not contagious. A bus wheezed to a stop, doors folding open like old lungs. I climbed in. The driver, a man in his 50s, with a cap that had forgotten its color, looked at the baby, then at me. "Rough night?" he said. "They all are," I answered. I showed him the transfer. "You know this stop?" He nodded. "Warehouse district. Not much there except old brick and bad ideas." He glanced at the baby again. "You're sure that's where you want to go?" "No," I said, "but I think it's where I'm supposed to." He shrugged, the kind of shrug that said he'd stopped arguing with fate a long time ago and hit the switch. The bus groaned forward. As we moved, the city slid past, walls covered in murals, half washed away, windows glowing with lives still in progress. I thought about the woman. I imagined her carrying the child through that rain, her shoes heavy, her heart heavier. Maybe she stood on that bridge, watching the water move, and thought about how it would feel to disappear. The bus rumbled over the tracks and slowed at the circled stop. I got out. The air smelled of rust and old wood. The warehouses leaned against each other like drunks, their windows blind with grime. And then I saw it, a narrow alley between two buildings, light spilling weakly from a door left ajar. A sign above it, the Riverside Mission, shelter and meals. Inside, the air was warm but tired. Tables lined up like confessions waiting to be heard. A man in a grey apron wiped them down with the kind of care you reserve for things you own but don't love anymore. He looked up when I entered. "Kitchen's closed," he said, then saw the baby and blinked. "Unless you're here for more than soup." "I'm looking for someone," I said. "A woman. Maybe came in last night. Brown hair, thin. Might have been bleeding." He frowned, searching memory like a drawer full of dull knives. "Lot of people come through like that," he said. "Some stay, most don't. She left this." I held out the note. He took it, studied the writing. His jaw twitched. "Yeah," he said quietly. "She was here." "When?" "Late. Close to midnight. Came in, soaked through. Said she just needed somewhere to sit. Wouldn't eat, wouldn't talk. Just kept holding her belly and rocking like she still had something in her arms." He pointed toward the back hallway. "We gave her a blanket, told her she could lie down. When I checked, an hour later, she was gone. Left the blanket folded on the cart. That's all." He hesitated. "You're not police, are you?" I shook my head. "No. There's someone she trusted too much." He nodded slowly, like that answer made more sense than it should. "She said a name once," he added. "Mara." The name landed in me like a flashback to smoke. Mara. I'd heard it before, from a priest dying under this same city, from a woman's whisper in another story, from the kind of memory that refuses to stay buried. Maybe it was another Mara. Maybe the world just likes to recycle its tragedies. "Do you know where she went?" I asked. He looked toward the door. I watched her cross the street, head toward the tracks. That's all. Tracks. The word carries weight in Chicago. It means border. It means divide. It means the line between the ones who still have a place to go and the ones who stop pretending. I thanked him and stepped back out. The rain had found its courage again, fine needles stitching the air. The baby stirred, but didn't cry. I pulled the coat tighter around him and followed the path toward the tracks. The warehouses thinned, giving way to gravel and rails that stretched out like sentences without punctuation. The smell of iron and damp earth filled the space between breaths. Halfway down the embankment, I saw it. A piece of fabric caught on the fence, fluttering weakly in the wind. Blue, faded, torn. I touched it. It was part of a woman's dress. Beside it, footprints in the mud. Small, barefoot. I followed them until they vanished at the edge of the platform. There, under the overhang, lay a paper cup and an old photo half pressed into the dirt. I picked it up. A woman holding a baby, standing in front of a bus stop sign. The same blue dress, the same face I'd imagined, tired, beautiful, and already half gone. On the back, 2 words written in the same rushed hand, "For him." The rails hummed somewhere distant, a train approaching. I could feel it in the soles of my shoes before I could hear it. The baby made a small sound, not a cry but something else, a reminder that the world still had reasons to keep spinning. I stepped back, held him close, and looked once more at the picture. Whatever story she'd started, she'd left me holding the last chapter. The wind pushed against me like it wanted me to move. And for the first time in years, I did. The rails quieted after the train passed, leaving the air sliced open and hollow. I stood there a long time, watching the empty track swallow its own echo. The baby pressed his cheek against my chest, the tiny rhythm of his breathing steady, alive. Proof that at least one thing in this world still worked the way it should. I turned the photograph in my hand until the rain had nearly erased the ink. For him. The words weren't for me, they were for the boy. Which meant that somewhere between that bus stop and this bridge, she had made a choice. And whatever it was, it had cost her everything. I tucked the picture inside my coat, just above the baby's heartbeat. If I was going to find her, I had to start with what she left behind. The shelter manager had mentioned the tracks, so I followed them west, past warehouses that looked like tombs for things that used to be useful. Each step was a question. What happened to her? What did she see that made running the only answer? The city gave me nothing back but the smell of rain and old metal. Under the viaduct, there was another kind of noise. Not traffic, not trains. A faint hum of generators and cheap speakers, coming from a cluster of tents lit by battery lamps. The smell of frying oil, cigarettes, and damp blankets told me I'd reached one of the hidden neighborhoods, the kind that doesn't exist on maps, but keeps the city from cracking in half. People looked up when I passed. Faces I half knew from other corners, other fires. Benny once said that down here, we all orbit the same gravity, pain, hunger, a need to tell someone the truth before it turns to poison. At the far end, a woman sat in front of a barrel fire, a baby stroller parked beside her. She wasn't Mara, but she had the kind of eyes that remembered too much. "You lost?" she asked. "Always," I said, but this time more than usual. She smirked, showing teeth made honest by neglect. "Then you belong." I showed her the picture. "You seen her?" She took it, squinting in the firelight. "Yeah, couple nights back. Came through here. Asked for formula. Said she was trying to get somewhere safe." "Did she say where?" "She said she was meeting someone who could help. A woman named Anna, I think." That name froze the breath in my throat. Anna, the volunteer from the church. The stranger must have seen my face change because she leaned closer. "You know her?" "Yeah," I said. "I think I do." "Then maybe you know she don't always help for free." I didn't answer. Sometimes silence is the only way to keep the ground from tilting too fast. I walked back toward these streetlights, every step heavier. The baby stirred but didn't cry, like he trusted me to figure it out. At the church, the doors were still open, and the light inside looked softer than it had any right to. Anna was there, wiping down tables, the smell of bleach trying too hard to hide the truth. She looked up when she saw me. "Walter, you came back." "Yeah," I said, stepping forward. "I found the bus stop." Her hands froze mid-motion. "You shouldn't have gone there." "I think I was supposed to." I took the photograph from my pocket and laid it on the table between us. "You know her." Her lips tightened. "Where did you get that?" "By the tracks, near where she disappeared." She looked down at the picture, then away. "She came here that night. Said she needed help. Said someone was after her. Who? She hesitated, then shook her head. It's complicated, try me. She worked for a foundation, one of those charity fronts that moves money in the dark. Same people Father Adrian was trying to expose. She met my eyes then, and I saw the same tired courage I'd seen in the priest before the bullet found him. She stole something from them. Documents, names, transfers. She was going to give it to me, but she never made it back. And the baby. Anna's voice broke on the edge of the word. They were using her as leverage. When she realized, she ran. The fire inside my chest turned cold. The foundation again. The same rot that kept surfacing under different names. She left him with me, I said quietly. Under the bridge. Anna's eyes glistened. Then she trusted you more than she trusted God. Silence filled the room, like water rising. What do we do now? I asked. Anna took a deep breath. There's a contact. Someone she was supposed to meet. A journalist. They can make this public. If we give them what she stole, maybe the people hunting her will finally stop. Do you have it? She nodded, reaching into her coat. From the pocket came a flash drive, sealed in plastic, its surface scratched and dirty. She gave me this the night she ran. Told me to hide it. The baby stirred again, his tiny hand pressing against my chest, as if to remind me he existed too. Walter, Anna said, if they find out you have him, they'll come for you. I looked down at the sleeping face, at the fragile proof of a life that shouldn't have survived the night. They already did, in other stories. She placed the drive in my palm. Get him somewhere safe. I'll meet the reporter. I wanted to argue, but the set of her jaw told me she'd already decided what kind of ending she was willing to write for herself. I tucked the drive deep inside my coat and stepped back out into the rain. The city had gone quiet again, that strange, waiting silence before something breaks. The baby's warmth was the only real thing left. I walked south, toward the shelter where Benny sometimes sleeps, thinking maybe we could hide there for the night. Halfway across the bridge, headlights swept over the wet concrete, cutting the world in half. A black car. Windows tinted too dark for mercy. I turned, instinct louder than thought, but the sound of the engine was already behind me. Tires hissed. A door opened. Anna's voice screamed once, then nothing. The baby twitched, startled. I pressed him closer, heart hammering. I ran, the first real run I'd managed in years, down the slope, toward the river. The city lights strobing off puddles, my breath loud in my ears. Behind me, footsteps, shouting. A gunshot cracked the air like the sky tearing. I dove behind a concrete pillar, chest burning. Baby wailing now, alive, furious, needing the world to stop pretending it wasn't listening. Another shot. The echo rolled across the water and died somewhere under the bridge. When I dared to look back, the car was gone. The street above empty. Only the rain stayed. I held the baby and whispered nonsense until his cries softened to hiccups. Above us, the city went on pretending. I stayed there until dawn, waiting, thinking, remembering the way Annie's voice had sounded when she said, "They'll come for you." She was right. They always do. But not tonight. Tonight, I had something worth running for. Morning found the river, the color of tin and smoke. The city above yawned itself awake. Sirens stretching, buses sighing, pigeons arguing over crumbs of yesterday. Down below, where sunlight forgets to look, I held the baby close and waited for the world to decide what to do with us. The gunshots still echoed somewhere in the back of my skull. When I finally climbed the slope, the bridge was empty. No car, no body, just a single shoe in the gutter, soaked through and small. Anna was gone, the way Mara had been gone, the way everyone who tries to do the right thing in this city eventually disappears. I knew better than to look for her. Some stories end where the blood dries. Others end in paperwork no one will ever sign. But I wanted to believe she'd made it far enough to pass the flash drive to someone braver. Someone who could burn the truth loud enough that the whole city would smell it. Maybe that's faith. Believing in the version of a person you never get to see again. I walked until my legs remembered what pain felt like. When I reached the church, the doors were locked. Through the window I could see a single candle burning on the table where I'd left the picture. Someone had placed the photo beside the flame. The woman in the blue dress, smiling with her baby in her arms. The caption she'd written, for him, now half curled from the heat. I left it there. Some things are meant to fade where they can be forgiven. Back under the bridge, Benny was waiting. He had a cup of coffee in one hand and a cigarette, pretending to be brave, in the other. He looked at the bundle in my arms and nodded like a man greeting a consequence. "He's still breathing," he said. "Yeah," I said. "That's the good news." He took a drag, coughed out the smoke. "What's the bad?" "The world he's breathing in." We sat in silence for a while, the fire spitting little truths into the cold air. Benny finally said, "You're gonna keep him." I looked down. The baby's face had softened into that strange peace only the very young and the very old manage. His fingers were curled around the edge of my coat, holding on like he'd already decided I was home. "I dunno," I said. "I don't even know if I'm still someone who can be kept." Benny shrugged. "Doesn't matter what you are. Matters what you do." Simple words, hard medicine. I'd spent years watching people talk about doing good and then running out of courage halfway through. Maybe this was the universe's way of daring me not to run. I tore a page from my notebook, the one where I used to keep the names of people who died under this bridge so they wouldn't vanish twice. I wrote down one more line. He was found. He was not alone. Then I wrapped the page around the note his mother had left, folded them together, and slipped them into the lining of my coat. A record, a promise, a beginning. By noon, the city was awake enough to pretend it cared. I walked to the hospital near the river. The lobby smelled of disinfectant and forgiveness. A nurse behind the counter looked up when I came in, eyes tired but kind. "I found him," I said simply. "He needs someone who knows what to do." She nodded, the way professionals do when the story behind the story is one they've heard before but still hurts to hear. She took the baby, checked his breathing, his pulse, the tiny map of veins under his skin. "He's strong," she said. "Lucky." "Yeah," I said. "One of us had to be." I gave her the bag with the formula, the bottle, the small blue hat. She smiled, maybe at the sight of something so soft, surviving a night like ours. "Can I put a name on the form?" she asked. I thought about that for a long second. Then I said, "Call him Jonah." She wrote it down without asking why, but I knew. Because Jonah was the man who ran from what he was meant to do, and still got delivered exactly where he was supposed to be. When I stepped back into the street, the sun had finally broken through the clouds. A weak, pale thing, but real. The kind of light that doesn't warm much, just proves the dark didn't win. I walked to the bridge and sat by the fire again, the city's hum folding around me like an old coat. The smoke rose slow, curling toward a heaven that's probably more crowded than it should be. I thought about Mara, about Anna, about the woman in the blue dress, and the baby who refused to stop breathing, about all the stories people leave behind like broken shoes in the rain. Sometimes I think my job isn't to save anyone. It's just to remember them long enough that they don't disappear completely. The river moved below, quiet and steady, carrying the city's secrets out to where names stop mattering. I took out my notebook and wrote the last line of the night. She left her baby next to me that night and never came back. But not everything that's abandoned is lost. I closed the book, fed another stick to the fire, and let the warmth find the parts of me that still believed in beginnings. The wind shifted, carrying a hint of salt and smoke. The city exhaled, and I whispered the way I always do when the story is ready to sleep. My name is Walter Gray, and I'm the voice on the sidewalk.